Welcome to Module 3 lecture. Hopefully you guys are finding this format of learning somewhat enjoyable. As I said before, I don't like to leave you guys alone on an island, and I've heard that feedback that you guys want to hear from us, so this is my way of kind of integrating all of the things that are in this particular module to get you to learn more about global supply chain, in particular marketing, logistics, and channels. So next slide. U.S. business logistics is big business. Approximately, I would say 60% of anything that you buy, the cost is logistics. So you can think of it, if you remember that bottle of water, I mean, you know, by the time it gets manufactured all the way to the end supply chain, it's about 60%. And 8% of the gross national domestic product of the U.S. So this particular business is huge. It's a big indicator of our global economy, our local economy. And this is just a snippet from Statista, which I showed you how to do, that shows U.S. business logistics costs from 2005 to 2021. And you can see in 2021, we reached $1.85 trillion dollars. That is a lot of money. So let me go to the next slide. This slide, it breaks down the logistics cost by type. So these are the logistics costs by type in the US. As you can see here, we have 1.2 billion is from transportation, 500 billion from inventory carrying costs. So that is the inventory in the supply chain. And then other costs is 140. We go to the next slide. This is a breakdown of the U.S. transportation costs in 2021 by mode of transportation. So as you can see here, and in chapter 8, it covers this. Primary, private or dedicated fleet is $415 billion. Full truckloads, 332. Parcel, 134.5. Parcel is, you know, the smaller last mile logistics, and like talking about Walmart, that's about, you know, is going to be growing. We have rail, which is 88.3. Less than truckload, which is 83. Pipeline, 67.3. Air freight, 52.7. And water, 32.4. So again, all of this is coming from the Council Supply Chain of Management Professionals, in which I put the 2022 industry report, in which I'm going to ask you all to blog upon in this week's individual assignment. So as you can see here, the percent of GDP, about 8%, continuing to grow, the concentration on the channel management, the omni-channel, the last mile logistics, all of these figures are going to continue to grow, and the forecast of job and employment is going to go up for all of us. This is just something that I found, share of warehousing and logistics providers taking measures to reduce distribution center costs, taking any action. So you can see that, you know, 95%, which the gray is 2017, is taking action. Improving warehouse processes, and that is, you know, how can you stack the pallets in the warehouse? Can you have technology in the warehouse that helps you move the pallets? How is your sorting? Is it automated? Is the sorting automated by zip code? How can you improve all of the sortation procedures without relying on a person? That also reduces error as well. Improving inventory control. How are you controlling your inventory within the warehouse? Do you know if things are missing? Do you have controls upon your inventory to know if you're missing a pallet, missing a box, all the way down to the SKU? How are you changing your rack and layout configuration? So if you've ever been in a warehouse, usually there's an inbound and then an outbound. How is that layout and configuration helping you or minimizing your work? Your information technology in the warehouse is very important. Having up-to-date information technology to help you so that you can use your workforce in other areas. It's not necessarily about replacing the workforce, as it is to improve the technology in the warehouse such that you can minimize the amount of staff needed, but yet maximize the overall optimization. Renegotiating leases using third-party warehouses and third-party private trucking companies. As you can see, I think I heard that one of the, is it Amazon or FedEx, is leasing out opportunities for people to start their own trucking companies with the FedEx brand, reducing the number of square footage per space, negotiating with retail customers to reduce order processing requirements, which again, I'm surprised to see that on there because it's all about the customer and making sure that we get the product from the customer in a timely manner. But I also could see that that is switching the inventory from the warehouse to the retailer and using the retailer's warehouse space. Next slide. So from the materials and learning in the book, I just kind of wanted to cover how complex this then becomes, because in the last module I covered the overall supply chain, but this kind of shows how difficult this gets. So I just, some of us, you can think about a product like, let's say we're going to use beer. It's a good example, plus it's fun, right? So what goes on in beer? Hops, right? Barley, water, wheat. Just thinking about that for now. So material source. This could be the hops. This could be the barley. This could be the wheat. Just thinking it from that perspective. Where do you get the material? How does it get to the plant? Where do you get the material? How does it get to the plant? Where do you get the material? How does it get to the plant? Do you need all three of these at the plant at the same time? Some don't, right? Automobile manufacturers. So then you get to the plant warehouse, then you get to the distribution. So do you see how it becomes more complex? Also more complex with the more complex product. And so your performance cycle time in between here, you're measuring this. You're measuring how fast it can get from wheat into the plant, right? What if the wheat farm has some type of disease? Well, then you are now trying to get wheat from another state, perhaps another country. That adds time. Let's say the barley didn't grow correctly in certain resource that so that becomes a tier 2 supplier. So you have to have those backups in place. Then this becomes more complex. So as you see, as the transportation is the links and the communication between all of these is paramount. You have to have the ability to understand and trust your suppliers. You have to trust that they are going to do what they are required to do in order to support you. So that's this is like a very good map of understanding how complex it can get. So the work of logistics is really about integration, being able to integrate order processing. Ultimately, it all starts with the order, whether the order is coming from the supplier, whether the order is coming from the manufacturer, whether the order is coming from the distributor, the wholesaler, or from the retailer. All of that order processing has to be done in some central location so that you can get that order and you have the, so first you assess, do you have the inventory? What type of transportation are you going to get? Where are you going to warehouse material and handling, packaging, and all that kind of stuff? And who is your network that you're working with to create this integration amongst these channels? It is extremely complex. And in this particular case that you're going to work on in Harvard Business Review is about Walmart. And I'm going to ask you to map out their distribution map and discuss how, they get products from their manufacturers, from their warehouses to their stores. Talk a little bit about last mile logistics. Some of the things that Walmart is looking at is drone delivery. They've been very successful in testing of certain products that can be successfully delivered with drone delivery. And as I provided the example of the bottle of olive oil, they purchased, or they had somebody bring it with a vehicle, paid that person. It was one bottle of olive oil. In my mind, that would have been perfect for a drone delivery, right? It just come in, drop it off, and there it is. So all of these things is the work of logistics. And as I said, logistics is big business, completes the supply chain. It encompasses not only the trucking, but if it's air, if it's use of rail, if it's oil and the use of gasoline and pipeline, if it's the use of transportation, third-party providers, if they own their own assets like Pitt, Ohio, or if they don't own their own assets like FedEx. You think about the Uberization of logistics, which I've heard, and that's a new terminology of all of these things trying to minimize that cost, but yet increase that ability to get that product to the customer, is the work of logistics. So I hope that this helps cover the module this week. And this week, you're really going to dive into what transportation is, bill of ladings, the 5 transportation types, trucking. You're going to talk about warehouses and the complexity of warehouses, processes of warehouses, where things reside in the warehouse, how to pick from warehouses, meaning picking the product. One last final note, I'll talk to you about Frito-Lay, which is one of their own distribution networks, which is state of the art. When I worked there, we had a small format that was distributed into the local Chicago area. And I remember one time I was in a meeting and we were talking about Limon Flamin' Hot Cheetos. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't get those into, eaches. So if I wanted to order 6 bags as opposed to 36 in a case, why couldn't I get that? Well, it wasn't on the pick line. So in the warehouse, there's a pick line. So I had to have it added to the pick line, which was a process. But again, knowing all of these intricacies. And then on top of that, in logistics, you have regulation. So let me touch on that a bit. Regulation is important. Department of Transportation, DOT driving logs. There's certain laws where drivers are not allowed to work over a certain number of hours. They're not allowed to drive more than 10 hours in a day. They can only have spans in between. Mandatory off time, so they have a driver log that tracks that. Same with pilots, same thing. Anybody that's running a transportation network has to have some type of log of that employee, which protects us, protects society in general. I mean, you don't want somebody driving behind the wheel of a tanker truck that hasn't had any sleep. You don't want somebody flying an airplane with you on it that hasn't had any sleep, right? So these rules and regulations are there for a reason, which also goes into the planning, preparation processes, and integrated logistics management. Thank you. Have a great day. This concludes Module 3.